Tell me when you're ready to rock, Gavin.
It's filming.
Right. For Auld Lang Syne, eh? And for the future. Well, hello, agus Key Admira Fadge. Hello, and 100,000 welcomes. It's Mishaheen Paraig McNeil. I'm Paraig McNeil, tradition bearer, Gaelic bard, and bard in all of Scotland's different languages, because I love the culture and the language and the way of thinking, the paradigm of this ancient nation which has given so much to humanity. And nowhere is that more exemplified than in traditional verse composed by the bards of old from time immemorial. And here today we are at the fulcrum of the very place that could have changed the history of Scotland and the world forever. Sliabh an Chirim, Sheriff Muir, on the hills above Dunblane. And I'm looking here at the mountain of Dumayet, which sees the soles of my feet every week as we still run up the hills. Just like Cuilche of the Fianna, Finn McCool's men of ancient times. But behind me here is Carnan Rahach, the monument to the MacRaes. The MacRaes, the valiant clan who stood in the front left of the Jacobite army of 1715. And because there was insufficient cavalry support, they took a serious amount of casualties. But they would never retreat, because that was not in their creed. 12 times they reformed and 12 times they came back. And was it not General Whitman, who was on the side of the English, who admired them for their courage, saying he never saw such a fine line of men standing in perfect unison. And he lamented the fact that they had so many casualties. But the poetry of Sheriff Muir will make sure that this event, like many events in Scotland, will never be forgotten. Oh, we build monuments. We have tour guides. We have all sorts of wonderful things ways in which people can view the history of the country. But what better than from the breath and from the mouth of the bards who were eyewitnesses who lived there at the time. In 1715, there lived in the island of Eigg a man called John MacDonald. He was one of the great Clanranald race. He was known as Ian Tu, Mac Ian, Vic Elaine. That's Ian, son of Black-haired Ian, son of Alan. They couldn't use their second names because they got the postman very confused, since everybody had the same second name. He was what they called a vernacular bard, and he composed many a verse at that particular time, but he was an innovator. See, Highlanders were never stuck in a lay-by. They were always willing to innovate, like the great MacCrimmon pipers, who took pipe music to its zenith under the sponsorship, the patronage of Charles II, and so was with Ian Tu. Normally, the Gaelic poems that were composed by the clan bards were in praise of their race, of their chiefs, of the valiance of their men, of the history of their battles, to help them to stand strong in the face of the strife. But Ian Du was to introduce a new convention into Highland poetry. It was called allies, whereby, as you'll hear in part of this song, all the clans of the north were invited to stand together in common cause, even ancient enemies such as the Campbells and the MacDonalds in the same muster roll. And if that was not enough, the nobles of the lowlands were to come and join the cause. And no Gael up to this point had ventured to put such a piece together. This is what we called a braasnag, or an incitement to war. This was a national call to arms. And the way he constructed this wasn't like the old Gaelic strophic metre, which I'll give a few examples of in a minute. This was a new type of convention called aharan or auran, which was symmetrical metre, whereby the assonances, the vowels, would resound out like an iambic heartbeat. So when the warriors would strike upon their shields, they would hear it and it would stir them up, being reminded of the heroic deeds of their ancestors. Well, this particular poem opens out with an ancient prophecy. And the prophecy stems back to the days of the great and the one and only William Wallace. There lived a man called True Thomas, or Thomas the Rhymer. And according to the oral tradition, he was taken into the land of the Síochan, the fairy folk, or the queen of the fairy land. And he was in there for 7 years and a day. And he was given a gift of two things: a tongue that would never lie, and an eye that would see into the future. And he foresaw and he foretold of many things that was going to happen in Scotland's future. He saw the day when a French queen would rule Scotland, who would become the Queen of France as well, our beloved Queen Mary, one of the greatest monarchs we ever had. How tragic her end. One day her son would be the king of a united Britain, and of course that was James VI. But he also foresaw the day when there would be a great battle hard in Achluai, north of the Clyde, and the Gaels would arise from their glens, and Highland culture would have parity, equity with that of the rest of the world, being recognised as a cultural entity. This was Gaelic nationalism, and indeed Scottish nationalism. I don't believe all these lies of history who tell us that the Jacobite cause wasn't nationalist. Was it not in King James's proclamation in October of 1715? He said in his proclamation, quote, "to restore the kingdom to its most ancient liberation and independence." That's what King Jamie said. Oh, it wasn't Scots versus English on Sheriff Muir, it was nationalist versus unionist. That was the battle. So the song opens out with this ancient prophecy of Thomas's, and it translates, "This is the time of the prophecy to be fulfilled, when every noble will arise from their glen, and wild fierce anger in the service of the crown." And the second verse, "On that account every prancing horse shall shout for joy. On that account the English shall be destroyed, and the French, our companions, shall be at our back." Then he begins to enumerate all the different clans. It's a long song, so I'm just going to give you a few verses. "If the MacDonalds should arise," of course the MacDonalds always have to go first. "The MacDonalds should arise, those fierce thunderbolts, those stout lions, whose ancient right it was to use the red hand. My lord, it would be folly for them to fall upon you." I'll give you a few verses of the song. It's called Aur and Nanfinican Dialogue. This convention was to be repeated by another Clanranald bard in 30 years later, Alistair MacVeister Alexander MacDonald, poet laureate to Bonnie Prince Charlie, who also composed an Allies poem, but it was the invention of Ian Dhu MacDonald of Egg. Here it goes. She shone me shiran jaravaran tada ganakain bras mena manak firalava pahonara mavertus nur yeris gak trainer and I hate your glanur lerun ferek ages gerek kusherev shakhrun H ma hif na gal takli hound ach sachush gilion varek shengavar gaunsesli sund Bisas yn I cair, chigun taing gaf gachwn, bin a frank ich non caumpi, gre hawn cŵl, the MacDonalds. Nur a year is clondod, no leo and hagarach, na biaw ver fawr, the hun cosp and agarav. Look his of na kodak and nors to life yarak, mo goi gumbagod of gaivatosh agagarev, the MacLeods. Nelio di campor gan cabal the curshiel, Dreimrig o cannetis nan gorsit nan skia. Gurniers for ook el the curei grihurt lia, Gurn crua dollar doa the casagoas gadagaradia the MacLeans. Klangene han andrel on hit sound the sunreik, Dremakios kun einders kun tang hushen boy. Dreimri go Tokyo, Signach Strio, Cadon Cloa, Simac Mirach, Jisjirach, Vidinching of Suez, the Camerons, Gurleon, Verlev Helm, Hek Ew, and Lochial, Vier Kodag, and the Varag, and the Sayak, and the Griav. Id mer choda ve mer choda gleiser chonok rohion Shima go sam rus gagnak jul tidov shias the Mathesons Clonig vahan and gay lone hitch train the koldaram Another person yed in beard base of igarak Anaun do the voa the bin crua the lord kanak Bugun yakud beeman nur the yed could ferek Nambi I've got trainer de shade sanahum in inch and gee the kunya the gun home at coquin chakri in a sitchi acher gau ganjan mo shak nandu gau ikush haran kaun. And the last verse says, in common cause we shall stand together, and our blades will be over the heads of the strangers. Might sound like a bloody song, but there is nothing romantic about war. But certainly these people lived there at the time and they should know. And of course war bears its tragedy as well. And the Gael, the Highlanders, celebrated everything in verse. Birth, death was commemorated, battles were extolled, ancient bloodlines were praised, everything. There were songs for rowing, songs for working, songs for spinning, songs for weaving the cloth. And it was all poetry, and all poetry was sung. But by the same bard, I thought I might give you another one before I move on to Sheelis MacDonnell, the great bard of Keppoch. She was a fantastic bard. And she was one of the great bards of the 15 as well. Sheelis na Kichbich, as they called her. A fierce Jacobite, a fierce nationalist. At the battlefield of Sheriffmuir in 1715, Alan MacDonald, the 14th of Clanranald, was to die of his wounds. See, the Gael, the Highlander, commemorated everything in verse, so that those verses could be handed on to their progeny, to their children and their grandchildren, lest they forget. It was the great Callum MacLean, the folklorist, brother of the late and great Sorley MacLean, who said, quote, "The written history will tell us what is politic for us to hear, but that which is handed down by word of mouth will tell us the full story." Well, at the battlefield of Sheriffmuir in 17, he had been badly wounded, almost nigh unto death, in the Pyrenees Mountains, previous to the 1715 rising, so much so that he was so badly wounded that he could no longer have children. But anyway, he died of his wounds here at Sheriffmuir, and the bard, Ian Dhu, commemorates that in this lament, this ancient keening song for the dead. The first verse translates, in the year that our enemies sprung upon us, the 1,715 years that have sped, we have lost the fragrant rose of our kindred, and the sting of it will be with us forever. O you, O princely lord of the Ranalds, who the Lord God chose to be our guide, now lying in their inner periphery of the shroud boards. And the bard goes on to extol his virtues in hunting, in hospitality, and the one in braveness in battle who would not turn in the face of the enemy. And in the last verse is a prayer to God, where it says, O you who took Moses out of Egypt and obeyed the swords of the three in the fire, O King of Kings, do not let oppression come upon us. King of Kings, do not let oppression come upon us. So this is a lament for the dead in the form of a beseechment, if you like. It's an incantation, it's an invocation. And this laments the passing of Alan MacDonald, the great chief of Clanranald. The song is called Mar Around the Vachki Caroline, Clanranald's Lament. Liana le magad milagan koig jig samidela snashake da reinimach chail shinur osser kinest stun in your fefri for agnum bahorsdem Mark ik sundag nam pinagere kruyak nak chirak nak tagav kudam nak girak nurago bricken chine Va mi juvel do spirit of war, va mi juvel do spirit of war. Vau chow mount skak for the grease betus, keeper na faraki, the cast chingalavak nuda yerigan garavorst. Stugun bragan tanavar muaborst. Stugun bragan tanavar muaborst. Sound shuva the garavaniks betu gan chalakir as to lie before me rapsa iran yag butun chalakir sturain gu agus talavin muadon sturain gu agus talavin muadon Seldom Paraig doch cheles ben go nair at jee Jesus skade go heet gul Viki kellen an jeku Hier alleen ag an jees mar bekor Hier alleen ag an jees mar bekor Geins nach you ac an gawd ag an ryk a hugsyn gan gawtach Ca bevoa nach a caw gain Nish mar colin gan chiawnsyn O dain rawd as tawd a go ein followf O dain rawd as tawd a go ein followf Ac hier ac my siawns yn effet y sgolch y fwr na clarega ac yn triwr as yn eicyn gwn fi'n garag yn creican Rin ad ei ceicad ar cor Rin ad ei ceicad ar cor And then the second last verse of that piece, Lament to Clanranald, it mentions a hero who was called Rúil MacKillinoig, Ranald, son of young Alan. He was Ronald MacDonald of Morar. He was a tacksman, a Dunhuasal, who had studied the art of combating the evil one. And he was the one who took the confession of Alan Gerag's his father before he died, who had given himself to evil, and he had accepted his confession. But Alan, of course, was just the exact opposite, a total gentleman, but he died of his wounds because of the curse that was put upon the family. But in that second last verse, Ranald, who was a mighty man with a two-handed sword, had been killed by a dun-coloured bull the previous summer, and that's why he couldn't join them at the rising. But after the bull gored him, he lay there dying, and he composed a pibroch for the bull that had killed him, and it was called an Taravoer. Such was the sense of humour and honour of the Highlanders, that even on their deathbed they would honour a bull. Was it not himself that composed an Tarav Gerag, which is now in the Moidart collection, which my good friend Alan MacDonald, the piper, collected many of them. But you see, poetry and song was one of the ways in which information was handed down. The other way, of course, was storytelling. And to be a bard, you had to know a good number of tales from memory. This was utterly essential, because every piece of verse that you compose was ingratiated in your culture. There was nothing modern about it. There was an ancient line from these poems and verses, even just the way that the vowels were put together, that would go back to a line way back to the kings of old, like Con of the Hundred Battles, and even long before that, to very ancient times. The way that these poems were constructed, they were constructed in such a way, the Greeks called it, it's a Greek word, iambic. It just means a heartbeat, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. Even if you think of Robert Burns, when chap man billies leave the street and druthi neighbours meet, that's iambic. Sometimes you get the triple foot or the quadruple foot, but the Gaels tended to use iambic. That last song that I sung, Lament to Clanranald, Mararan de Vachki Kelein, was in a type of metre called strophic metre, which just simply means it can be 3 or 4 lines, but in the last line there's an extra syllable. That's all it means. And quite often they're either repeated or the last line's repeated. For example, in Lament to Rob Roy, the first line is Rein mi sug ag a charn, gab mi mul et nach gaun, mun scale hanna naul and rahajaw. Second verse, Gro gash gach mo gul, na vai ir a hiv, smochrech, rein en cheek, who farajorst. See that? They've got the extra syllable. That's what they call strophic metre. But iambic was very, very important. And the first song that I sung there, the Song of the Highland Clans, was very much like that. That one was actually triple-footed. Sishon Emesher and Jerever. So it's got that bum bum, bum bum, the heartbeat all the way through it. So the rhythm's actually built into it. It's actually in the song itself. I think since we're at Sheriff Muir, it would be important now to talk a wee bit about Sheelis MacDonnell of Keppoch. She was an amazing bardess. She was a daughter of Marci Craig, MacDonnell of Keppoch of the famous Colin and Bow. He was a famous Highland chief, and a very fierce one too, and a Jacobite. She composed many pieces, and this is actually a lullaby for her children. And this was a piece that she composed on the lead up to the 1715 Rising, as a kind of anticipation of the rising going to take place. But the refrain of the song is a talu, what they call a lullaby, if you like, for her children. It's a Haminam Chatel Snachdosh Kukmi. I am asleep, do not awaken me. In other words, do not awaken me until the rightful king is upon the throne. And this song is also quite graphic, as a lot of these songs are. It talks about how that many of the nobles were scattered after the Jacobite Rising of 1689, and she's lamenting that and calling them back to the cause. And there's many a woman lamenting for her husband who is missing. Then she talks about how that their bloods will, the sheaths of their swords will taste blood, their blades will taste blood, and of course it talks about. She refers to King George as the king of the pigs, that Whig King George, and she looks forward to the time when his neck will be in a noose. That was the way it was. At that particular time, these songs would have been regarded as treasonous, but the Highlanders were a law unto their own right, and nobody was going to tell them what to do. They were a sovereign people. So I'll give you this song anyway, Haminam Chatel by Sheelis MacDonnell. Gurmag mi mars kur gag finje fogreg. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Gunahir gunyevnes gun reicha go yorse. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Gurmag ben nuasal anachik nyak na shamer. Gunahir gnyevnes sikeri na honor. Ashir kaina no ashlan na khwariadri foseg. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Moruai achlaun akaun nan kurische. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Lukruskin naun nan budenen. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Get the hashif sanaum, fake lehaum, agus bunyan hen. Good nog shibur yaun, anan chaun ablas bunyan. Nurik shimas now, shibur bound beast vidya. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Cherina moike sa kaik sheri jorse. Haminam Chatel snadush kagmi. Manchi koren antawin Bihawak na kostig Aminam chato snadush kak mi Nanyilik shiv suas Anan kruata santun yathak Edrishlan swashlan kuages kumanta Skunskjur se shivoiva Li fuat einak bunjekain Yanen kato Usundukli